The cabin beyond Blackwater Lake. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. It sat alone in Ethan Carter's mailbox, resting beneath a stack of bills and advertisements. Nothing about it looked unusual at first glance except for one detail. There was no return address. The paper felt old, rough against his fingertips. The handwriting on the front stopped him cold. It was his father's. Ethan stared at it for several seconds. That couldn't be possible. His father had been dead for 12 years. A heart attack had taken him during a fishing trip when Ethan was 22. He remembered standing beside the casket, staring at the polished wood while people whispered condolences around him. Dead. Gone. Yet somehow he was holding an envelope written in the exact same slanted handwriting he had seen throughout his childhood. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message contained only one sentence. If you want the truth about what happened at Blackwater Lake, come back before October 17th. Nothing else.
No signature. No explanation.
Just those words. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Blackwater Lake. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 20 years. And there was a reason for that. Nobody from his hometown talked about Blackwater Lake anymore. Especially not after what happened to his brother. 20 years earlier, summer of 2006, Ethan was 14. His older brother Lucas was 17. The lake sat several miles beyond town, hidden among dense forests and steep hills. The locals avoided it. Some claimed people disappeared there. Others insisted strange lights appeared over the water at night. Most considered it just another small-town ghost story. Lucas didn't. Lucas loved mysteries. One August evening he convinced Ethan to sneak out and visit the lake after dark. Ethan remembered everything. The moonlight reflecting off perfectly still water. The silence. The strange feeling that something was watching them from the trees. Then Lucas had noticed a light moving across the opposite shore. A bright white glow. Not a flashlight. Not a lantern. Something else. Without warning, Lucas began walking toward it. Ethan shouted after him. Lucas never looked back. He disappeared into the forest. That was the last time Ethan ever saw him. Hundreds of volunteers searched. Police searched. Dogs searched. Nothing. No body. No evidence.
No clues.
Lucas Carter simply vanished. Eventually everyone accepted that he was dead. Everyone except Ethan. Now, 20 years later, the letter sat on his kitchen table. The truth about Blackwater Lake. The truth about Lucas. His hands trembled. The date mentioned in the note was only 4 days away. October 17th. Something about that date felt familiar. He opened his phone calendar. Then he remembered. October 17th was the exact anniversary of Lucas's disappearance. 20 years to the day. A knot formed in his stomach. Coincidence? Or intentional? By midnight, Ethan had made his decision. He was going home. The town of Millfield looked smaller than he remembered. The old gas station still stood near the highway. The diner still had its flickering neon sign. Even the church looked unchanged. But something felt wrong. The streets were quieter. The people seemed older. Tired. Like a place frozen in time. Ethan checked into a motel and spent the afternoon walking through town. Most people recognized him. Some smiled. Others looked uncomfortable, especially when he mentioned Blackwater Lake. The reactions were immediate. Faces tightened. Conversations ended. People suddenly remembered somewhere else they needed to be. Finally, he found someone willing to talk. Martha Jenkins, the retired librarian. She had known his family for decades. When Ethan showed her the letter, the color drained from her face. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "It came in the mail." Martha looked genuinely frightened. "You need to leave." "What?" "Leave town." Ethan laughed nervously. "Martha, what are you talking about?" She glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. Then she leaned closer. "There are things buried around Blackwater Lake." "What things?" She swallowed hard. "Secrets." "Whose secrets?" Martha hesitated. "The town's." Before Ethan could ask another question, she stood. "You shouldn't have come back." Then she walked away. That night Ethan couldn't sleep. Rain hammered the motel windows. Thunder rolled across the hills. At nearly 2 in the morning he finally drifted off. Then came the dream. He stood beside Blackwater Lake. The water was perfectly still. A thick fog covered everything. Across the lake stood a man. Tall, motionless. Watching him, the figure slowly raised one arm, pointing toward the forest. Then Ethan heard a voice. A familiar voice. Lucas. Ethan. The sound echoed across the water. Ethan. The figure stepped forward. Moonlight illuminated his face. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. It was Lucas. Exactly 17 years old. Not a day older. Not a wrinkle. Not a scar. The same face from 20 years ago. Lucas opened his mouth. 3 words emerged. They lied to us. Then the lake exploded. Thousands of hands burst from the water. Grabbing, reaching, screaming. Ethan woke up drenched in sweat. Lightning flashed outside. For a brief moment he saw someone standing in the motel parking lot, watching his room. A tall silhouette, motionless. Then darkness returned. The figure was gone. The next morning Ethan drove toward Blackwater Lake. The road was nearly abandoned. Overgrown branches stretched across cracked pavement. After 30 minutes he reached the old entrance. A rusted sign leaned sideways. Blackwater Lake Recreation Area. Closed. The words had almost faded away. The gate hung open, as though someone had been expecting him. Ethan parked. The forest seemed unnaturally quiet.
No birds. No insects.
Nothing. Just silence. Deep, oppressive silence. He started walking. The lake appeared 15 minutes later. Exactly as he remembered. Dark. Still. Endless. For several moments he simply stared. Memories flooded back. Lucas laughing. Lucas running ahead. Lucas disappearing into the trees. Then Ethan noticed something. Across the lake. On the opposite shore. A light. A white glowing light. Moving slowly between the trees. Just like 20 years ago. His breath caught. The light stopped. Then began moving deeper into the forest. Almost as if it wanted him to follow. Ethan looked around. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. Instead, he started walking. Toward the place where his brother vanished. Toward the truth hidden beyond Blackwater Lake. Toward a mystery that had waited 20 years for his return. And somewhere deep within those woods, unseen eyes were already watching him. Waiting. Because Ethan Carter wasn't the only one searching for answers. The light moved deeper into the forest. Ethan hesitated at the edge of the trees. The rational part of his mind told him to turn around, get back in his truck, and leave. Whatever had happened 20 years ago wasn't going to be solved by chasing mysterious lights through the woods. But another part of him, the part that had spent 2 decades wondering what happened to Lucas, wouldn't let him walk away. He stepped beneath the canopy. Almost immediately the temperature dropped. The air felt damp and cold. Thick branches blocked much of the sunlight, creating shadows that seemed darker than they should have been. The light continued moving ahead. Not fast. Not slow. Always staying just far enough away. As if it were leading him somewhere. The deeper Ethan traveled, the stranger the forest became. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes. Roots crawled across the ground like giant snakes. Several times he felt certain someone was walking nearby. He would stop. The sounds would stop. Then he'd continue. And the footsteps would return. By late afternoon he realized something unsettling. The forest was much larger than he remembered. Far larger. That shouldn't have been possible. Blackwater Lake's woods only stretched a few miles according to every map he'd ever seen. Yet he'd been walking for hours, and still hadn't reached the opposite shore. Then he found the first clue. Half buried beneath leaves sat an old backpack. His pulse quickened. He knelt beside it. The material was faded, rotting, covered in dirt. But he immediately recognized it. A patch sewn onto the front displayed a red mountain lion. Lucas's backpack. The one he'd been carrying the night he disappeared. Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. Inside he found a flashlight, a water bottle, and a small notebook. Most of the pages had been ruined by moisture, except for the last one. Written in hurried handwriting were 6 words. "They're not letting people leave." Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. Inside he found a flashlight, a water bottle, and a small notebook. Most of the pages had been ruined by moisture, except for the last one. Written in hurried handwriting were 6 words. "They're not letting people leave." Ethan stared at the sentence. Then a branch snapped behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just trees. Silence. Yet the feeling of being watched had become overwhelming. Suddenly another sound echoed through the forest. A voice. Faint. Almost impossible to hear. "Ethan." His blood froze. It sounded exactly like Lucas. "Ethan." The voice came again. Somewhere ahead. Without thinking, Ethan ran. Branches whipped across his face. Roots nearly tripped him. The voice continued calling his name. Closer now. Closer than before. Then the trees opened. Ethan emerged into a clearing and stopped dead. A cabin stood in the center. It looked ancient. Weathered wood. Broken windows. A sagging roof. The structure seemed abandoned for decades. Yet smoke drifted from its chimney. Someone was inside. The front door slowly creaked open. A man stepped outside. Ethan nearly collapsed. The man looked exactly like Lucas. Same height. Same face. Same brown eyes. Same scar above his eyebrow. Everything. Except it couldn't be Lucas. Because Lucas would be 37 years old. This man looked 17. The age he'd been when he vanished. Neither spoke. The forest became impossibly quiet. Finally Ethan whispered, "Lucas." The young man stared at him. Confusion appeared in his eyes. Then recognition. "Ethan?" The voice. It was him. It was really him. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. For 20 years he'd imagined this moment. Dreamed about it. Prayed for it. Yet now that it was happening, he couldn't process what he was seeing. Lucas took several steps forward. "You came back." Ethan's heart pounded. "Where have you been?" Lucas looked toward the forest. Fear crossed his face. "We don't have much time." "What are you talking about?" "They know you're here." "Who?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the trees, as though expecting someone to emerge. Finally, he spoke. "The Watchers." A cold sensation spread through Ethan's chest. "The Watchers." Lucas nodded. "They've been watching this place for longer than anyone knows." "What are they?" "I don't know." "People?" Lucas looked genuinely terrified.
No.
The word hung in the air.
No. Ethan.
"They're definitely not people." A gust of wind rattled the cabin. The forest suddenly seemed alive with movement. Shadows shifted between the trees. Ethan thought he saw figures standing among them. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Then they vanished. Lucas grabbed his arm. "We need to get inside." They entered the cabin. The interior was surprisingly clean. Candles burned on shelves. A small fireplace crackled. Maps covered one wall. Dozens of notes covered another. The room looked less like a home and more like a command center built by someone preparing for war. Ethan noticed dates written everywhere. Some recent. Some decades old. One name appeared repeatedly. Samuel Reeves. "Who is Samuel Reeves?" Ethan asked. Lucas froze. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he quietly answered. "He started all of this." Before Ethan could ask more questions, a loud knock echoed from outside. Both brothers jumped. Another knock. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Boom. 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 Lucas's face turned pale. "They found us." "What do you mean they found us?" The knocking continued. Not at the door. The walls. Something was circling the cabin. Walking around it. Ethan moved toward a window. Lucas grabbed him. "Don't look." "What?" "Whatever happens, don't look outside." The fear in his brother's voice was real. Terrifyingly real. Then a voice came from outside. A familiar voice. Their father's voice. "Ethan." Ethan froze.
Impossible.
Their father was dead. The voice came again. Ethan opened the door. Lucas closed his eyes. Don't listen to it. A chill raced through the room. The voice changed. Now it sounded like Martha Jenkins. Then it sounded like Ethan's mother. Then another voice. And another. And another. Dozens of voices. All calling his name. All coming from outside. The cabin walls groaned. Something scratched across the wood. Long. Slow. Like claws. Lucas handed Ethan a shotgun from beneath a table. What is happening? The answer came in a whisper. They don't like it when someone learns the truth. Another crash shook the cabin. Dust fell from the ceiling. For a brief second, Ethan looked toward a crack in the wall. And through that crack, he saw an eye. A huge, pale eye staring directly at him from outside. Then the wall exploded inward. And something began forcing its way into the cabin. The cabin wall shattered. Wood splintered across the room as something massive slammed against the exterior. Ethan stumbled backward, gripping the shotgun so tightly his knuckles turned white. For a moment, all he could see was dust. Then he saw it. A hand. Long. Pale. Far too large to belong to any human. Its fingers stretched through the broken wall, scraping across the floorboards. The skin looked almost gray, as if it had never seen sunlight. Then another hand appeared. And another. Lucas grabbed Ethan's shoulder. Back room. Now! They sprinted through a narrow doorway just as the front section of the cabin erupted with crashing wood. The sounds that followed were unlike anything Ethan had ever heard. Not animal noises. Not human screams. Something else. Something ancient. The back room contained a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. Lucas threw it open. A ladder descended into darkness. Go! Ethan climbed down first. Lucas followed and slammed the trapdoor shut above them. Almost immediately, heavy impacts shook the floor overhead. Whatever had entered the cabin was searching for them. The underground tunnel stretched farther than Ethan expected. Concrete walls lined the passage. Old electric lights flickered overhead. The tunnel felt man-made, purposefully built. Who built this? Ethan asked between breaths. Lucas looked ahead. Samuel Reeves. The name on the walls? Lucas nodded. He discovered them. The Watchers.
No.
Lucas swallowed hard. What the Watchers are protecting. The tunnel descended deeper underground. After several minutes, they emerged into a massive chamber. Ethan stopped in disbelief. The room was enormous, large enough to fit a football field. Generators hummed softly. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into darkness. Maps covered nearly every wall.
Photograph hung everywhere.
Thousands of photographs. Blackwater Lake, the forest, the town, its residents. Some photos appeared decades old. Others had been taken recently. Then Ethan noticed something disturbing. Many photographs showed people who had disappeared over the years. Missing hikers, missing fishermen, missing children. Dozens of faces stared back at him. Lucas walked toward an old table. There have been more than 80 disappearances connected to Blackwater Lake. Ethan felt sick. 80, at least. What happened to them? Lucas hesitated. The same thing almost happened to me. He opened a weathered folder. Inside were newspaper clippings dating back over a century. One headline immediately caught Ethan's attention. Local family vanishes near Blackwater Lake, 1891. Another. Search called off for missing campers, 1924. Another. 5 fishermen disappear without trace, 1978. The pattern was impossible to ignore. For more than 100 years people had been disappearing, and somehow nobody had connected the dots. Lucas pulled a large map from the wall. Red pins covered the area surrounding the lake. Every disappearance had occurred within a specific radius. Perfect circle. Centered directly on Blackwater Lake. What is this place? Ethan whispered. Lucas stared at the map. That's what Samuel Reeves spent his entire life trying to understand. He handed Ethan a leather journal. The cover was cracked with age. The first page contained a date, 1887. Ethan carefully turned the pages. The handwriting belonged to Samuel Reeves. a former surveyor who had arrived in Millfield more than a century ago. At first the journal seemed normal. Descriptions of wildlife, weather observations, mapping projects. Then the entries changed. Samuel began describing strange lights over the lake. Voices heard at night, people appearing where they shouldn't be. And finally, a cave, located beneath Blackwater Lake. Ethan looked up. A cave. Lucas nodded. Keep reading. The next pages became increasingly frantic. Samuel claimed he'd discovered a tunnel leading beneath the lake. Inside, he found something impossible. A structure. Not natural. Not human. Older than anything he'd ever seen. The journal described giant stone walls covered with symbols. Passages descending far below the earth. And one sentence written repeatedly throughout multiple pages. It is awake. Ethan closed the journal. What does that mean? Lucas looked toward the far end of the chamber. Fear returned to his eyes. I'll show you. Before Ethan could respond, every light in the room flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. The generators fell silent. The chamber became completely black. For several seconds, neither brother moved. Then came a sound. Far away, deep within the tunnels. A low vibration, almost like a distant heartbeat. Thump. The concrete floor trembled. Thump. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Thump. The sound felt impossibly large, as though something enormous was moving beneath them. Lucas switched on a flashlight. His face had gone pale. It knows you're here. What knows? The heartbeat stopped. The silence felt worse. Then dozens of lights appeared at the far end of the chamber. Small white lights, floating in the darkness. Watching, Ethan counted them. 10, 20, 30, more. The lights slowly moved closer. Lucas backed away. They shouldn't be here. The lights continued advancing. And then Ethan realized they weren't lights at all. They were eyes. Hundreds of eyes. Reflecting the flashlight beam from figures standing in the darkness. Tall figures. Motionless figures. The watchers. Neither brother spoke. The creatures simply stood there, observing, waiting. Then one stepped forward. For the first time, Ethan saw its full shape. It stood nearly 8 feet tall. Its limbs were unnaturally long. The floor cracked again. A jagged line shot across the concrete chamber like lightning frozen in stone. Thump, thump, thump. The sound echoed through the underground complex. Each pulse felt stronger than the last, like a gigantic heart beating somewhere beneath the earth. The watchers remained motionless. Dozens of glowing eyes stared directly at Ethan. The one standing closest took another step forward. Using Ethan's own voice, it spoke again. You should not have returned. Ethan raised the shotgun. The creature didn't react. It simply watched. Lucas slowly lowered the weapon. Don't. What do you mean don't? Ethan whispered. They aren't afraid of guns. The watcher tilted its head. Then, unexpectedly, it spoke in Lucas's voice. We tried. The words froze both brothers. Lucas stared at it. The creature continued. We tried to keep it asleep. Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere deep below, stone groaned. The sound resembled an entire mountain shifting. Ethan looked at Lucas. What is it talking about? Lucas hesitated, then finally told him the truth. The Watchers aren't the enemy. Ethan blinked. What? The town believed they were responsible for the disappearances. They aren't.
No.
The Watchers remained silent, almost as if they were allowing him to explain. Lucas swallowed hard. 20 years ago, when I followed the light into the forest, I found the cave Samuel Reeves discovered. Thump. The heartbeat grew louder. I went inside. His voice trembled. And I found something. The chamber lights suddenly flickered back on for a split second. Just enough for Ethan to glimpse the photographs hanging on the walls. Every missing person. Every disappearance. Every victim. Then darkness returned. Lucas continued. The cave leads to a structure buried beneath the lake. A structure built by who? No one knows. Lucas looked toward the ground. It's older than recorded history. The words hung in the air. Then the watcher spoke again, this time using a completely unfamiliar voice. Ancient, deep, almost mechanical. It dreams. The chamber fell silent. Ethan stared at the creature. What dreams? No answer came. Instead, another earthquake shook the complex. A section of wall collapsed. Concrete exploded outward. Alarms suddenly blared somewhere in the darkness. Lucas turned pale.
No.
What? The seal. A red emergency light began flashing. Again. Again. Lucas sprinted toward a nearby control panel. Ethan followed. An old monitor flickered to life. The screen displayed a map of the underground tunnels. One area blinked bright red. Directly beneath Blackwater Lake. A warning flashed repeatedly. Containment failure. Containment failure. Containment failure. Ethan looked at Lucas. What does that mean? Lucas didn't answer immediately, because he was staring at something else. The date, October 17th. Today's date, the anniversary of his disappearance. The anniversary of dozens of disappearances. The same date appeared throughout Samuel Reeves' journals. Over and over. Every 20 years. October 17th. A cycle. Pattern. Something that repeated. Lucas looked terrified. It wakes every 20 years. Ethan felt his stomach drop. What wakes? Before Lucas could answer, a deafening sound erupted from below. Not a roar. Not a scream. Something worse. A sound so deep it felt impossible for a living creature to make. The entire complex shook. Concrete pillars cracked. Lights burst overhead. The watchers suddenly moved. For the first time, every one of them turned toward the tunnel leading deeper underground, as if responding to a command. Then they began running. Hundreds of them, racing toward the source of the sound. Lucas grabbed Ethan. We need to move. Move where? The lake. Are you insane? It's the only way to stop this. Another massive tremor hit. The floor beneath them collapsed. A dark abyss opened only feet away. Ethan caught a brief glimpse of what lay below. His blood turned to ice. Far beneath the complex was an enormous cavern. And in that cavern, something moved. Something so large he couldn't comprehend its size. A shape bigger than buildings. Bigger than the underground chambers. A single eye slowly opened in the darkness. An eye the size of a truck. It looked upward. Directly at him. Ethan stumbled backward. His heart nearly stopped, because he instantly recognized the eye. It matched the sketches Samuel Reeves had drawn over a century earlier. The same eye, the same creature, the thing beneath Blackwater Lake, the thing that had been sleeping, the thing responsible for every disappearance, the thing the watchers had spent generations guarding. And now, it was awake. The cavern erupted with movement. The gigantic eye blinked once. Then a voice entered Ethan's mind. Not through his ears. Inside his head. Ancient. Cold. Endless. I remember you. Ethan froze. The voice continued. Your brother was only the beginning. Then the eye slowly widened. And something began rising from the darkness below. The massive eye continued to rise from the darkness. Ethan stood frozen at the edge of the collapse. His mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. The creature below wasn't simply large. It was impossible. Ancient stone-like skin stretched across a body that seemed to disappear into the depths of the cavern. Massive ridges moved beneath the darkness like mountains shifting beneath the ocean. The eye never left Ethan. And the voice returned. You came back. The words echoed inside his skull. Pain shot through his head. He dropped to one knee. Lucas grabbed him. Don't listen to it. What is it? Ethan shouted. Lucas looked terrified. I don't know. Nobody does. The watchers continued rushing toward the lower tunnels. Hundreds of them disappearing into the depths. Not attacking. Not fleeing. Preparing. As if they had performed this ritual before. Again. And again. For centuries. The cavern shook violently. A piece of concrete crashed into the abyss below. The creature's eye followed it. Then, without warning, memories flooded Ethan's mind. Not his memories. someone else's. He saw Samuel Reeves standing beside Blackwater Lake in 1887. He saw the cave discovery, the underground city, the sleeping giant. Then another memory, a group of settlers in the 1700s, another group before them, then people dressed in clothing Ethan didn't recognize. Thousands of years of memories, thousands of years of fear. Everyone had discovered the same truth. Something lived beneath Blackwater Lake. Something ancient. Something that wasn't supposed to wake. The voice returned. I dream. The memories intensified. And when I dream, the cavern trembled. Your world continues. Ethan suddenly understood. The disappearances. The cycle. The watchers. Everything. The creature wasn't hunting people. It was sleeping. And every 20 years it came close to waking. The missing people had been sacrifices, taken by the watchers, used somehow to keep the entity asleep. A horrifying bargain. A few lives every generation. Or something far worse. Lucas stared at him. You saw it too. Ethan nodded. His face had gone pale. The realization felt unbearable. The watchers weren't monsters. They were prison guards. And the prison was failing. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the complex. A deafening crack echoed from below. The creature was moving. Actually moving. For the first time, the entire mountain seemed to shake. Lucas looked toward the tunnel leading to the lake. If it fully wakes, everything is over. Ethan stared at him. What do we do? Lucas pulled an old journal from his backpack. Samuel Reeves' final journal. Page had been marked. Only one paragraph remained readable. If the seal ever breaks, return the heart to the water. The heart? Ethan asked. Lucas reached inside a metal locker nearby. For 20 years he had kept something hidden. Wrapped in cloth. Protected. Waiting. He slowly revealed it. A black crystal. About the size of a football. Its surface pulsed faintly. Like a heartbeat. Thump. 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 The same rhythm shaking the cavern. Ethan's eyes widened. That's its heart. Lucas nodded. I stole it when I escaped 20 years ago. Everything suddenly made sense. The creature had awakened because the heart had been removed. The watchers hadn't been hunting Lucas. They'd been searching for the stolen heart. Trying to repair the prison. Trying to prevent exactly this moment. Another violent tremor hit. The ceiling began collapsing. Lucas shoved the crystal into Ethan's arms. Run. What? Take it to the lake. What about you? Lucas smiled sadly. For the first time, Ethan noticed how exhausted his brother looked. How tired. How broken. 20 years hiding underground. 20 years carrying the weight of the world. It's my turn to finish this. Before Ethan could protest, Lucas pushed him toward the tunnel. Then turned back toward the abyss. Toward the rising creature. Toward the approaching darkness. And for the first time in 20 years, Ethan realized he might lose his brother all over again. The tunnel shook as Ethan ran. Chunks of concrete crashed around him. The black crystal pulsed in his arms. Each heartbeat growing stronger. Faster. The sound behind him was unimaginable. The mountain itself seemed alive. When Ethan finally burst from the tunnel entrance, night had fallen. Blackwater Lake stretched before him. The water churned violently. Waves crashed against the shore. The sky overhead had turned almost completely black. Clouds rotated above the lake in a massive spiral. And something was rising beneath the surface. Something enormous. The water bulged upward. Trees along the shoreline bent under powerful winds. Ethan heard screaming from distant Millfield. People had begun to notice. The world was changing. The creature was waking. Then Lucas emerged from the tunnel. Blood covered his face. He looked barely able to stand. Behind him came the watchers. Hundreds of them. They formed a line along the shore, facing the lake. Waiting. Lucas pointed toward the center. Throw it. Ethan looked down at the crystal. The heart. The key. The thing that had been missing for 20 years. Another massive shape moved beneath the water. Closer now. A colossal silhouette. Lucas shouted. Now! Ethan hurled the crystal as hard as he could. The black object sailed through the air. For one terrifying second, it seemed to hang above the lake. Then it struck the water. Everything stopped. The wind, the waves, the noise. Silence consumed the world. The crystal sank beneath the surface. Deep, deeper, until it disappeared. Nothing happened. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the lake began glowing. A brilliant blue light spread beneath the water. The entire lake illuminated from below. The giant shape stopped moving. The eye that had begun emerging from the depths slowly closed. The voice entered Ethan's mind one final time. Not angry, not threatening, almost peaceful. I am tired. The light intensified. Let me dream. The lake exploded with radiance. The brightness forced everyone to shield their eyes. A shockwave swept across the forest, across Millfield, across the mountains. Then, darkness, complete darkness. When Ethan finally opened his eyes, the storm was gone. The water was calm, still, silent. Blackwater Lake looked exactly as it had 20 years earlier, as though nothing had happened. The watchers stood motionless along the shoreline. One by one they turned toward the forest, then disappeared into the darkness. Gone, without a trace. Their duty finished, at least for now. Ethan looked beside him. Lucas was smiling, a genuine smile, the first one Ethan had seen since finding him. It worked. Ethan laughed nervously. It actually worked. Lucas nodded. Then his smile faded. His body became translucent. Ethan's heart dropped.
No.
Lucas looked down at his hands. I think I understand now. What are you talking about? When I took the heart. His voice weakened. I was never supposed to leave. Tears filled Ethan's eyes.
No.
The lake kept me alive. Lucas looked toward the water. The same way it kept the creature asleep. His outline continued fading. Ethan. Don't. Listen to me. Ethan couldn't speak. For 20 years he'd searched for answers. For 20 years he'd wanted his brother back. Now he was about to lose him again. Lucas smiled. And for the first time since they were children, everything felt okay. You found me. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek. Lucas nodded. That's enough. Then he vanished. Like mist in morning sunlight. Gone. The lake became still. The forest became silent. And Blackwater Lake returned to sleep. Months later, Ethan remained in Millfield. Most people never learned what happened. The disappearances stopped. The nightmares stopped. Life slowly returned to normal. But every October 17th, Ethan visits the shore. He sits quietly and watches the water. Sometimes the lake is perfectly still. Sometimes strange lights appear in the distance. And on rare nights, when the fog rolls across the surface and the moon shines just right, he swears he can see a young man standing on the opposite shore, smiling, watching, waiting, not trapped, not lost, just making sure the dream continues. And deep beneath Blackwater Lake, far below human understanding, something ancient sleeps once more, dreaming of a world that may never know how close it came to ending.